Scale Up, the podcast for driving growth in your MSP, delivered by industry experts. Hello everyone, welcome back to Halo House for another episode of Scale Up. I'm here with Darren again, and today we're going to be talking about the importance of culture in your MSP and how that's going to help you drive profitability. So Darren, how do you think culture fits into the conversation of MSP profitability?
I think it's massive. I was brought up with a way of thinking that we look after our people, those people look after our clients and customers, and then those customers look after the business. So if we've got the right people on the buzz and we're making sure that that culture is correct, they're then going to pass that on and attract the right customers. You know, what we see is people of a certain mind and a certain frame are going to attract certain customers. So if you can get the right culture, you're equally going to attract the right customers. Those customers then are going to get value out of that service because your people are passionate about that service. And equally, that's going to increase the profitability of the business. Sure. So the aim really is look after our people. You know, in an MSP, everything that we do evolves around our people. It evolves around labour and time. And so we need to be very keen on that function.
Yeah. And so what does it mean to have a good culture? How do you define that?
We talked a little bit earlier about having duplications of ourselves. And I think sometimes people try and develop a culture that actually isn't what you see in the business. And ultimately, we should hire and fire against the culture and values.
Yeah.
And so we need to, first of all, be realistic with what type of culture we want to create. Yeah. And then we're creating duplications of ourselves within the team. And then what you're seeing then is the energy, the passion, the focus on everything being successful in the business. And so then, you know, typically what we see a lot of is the business owner is trying to drive something forward, and ultimately they run out of energy at some point. Where actually, rather than one people, if we have 20 people driving this forward, combined energy, it's going to be far more successful.
Absolutely. And we discussed in an episode about tracking KPIs, and part of that conversation was about describing those KPIs in the form of a story, which is involved in your internal business reviews. And I think that's also true for a cultural perspective as well. It's about changing the mindset of the people that are coming into the office and working for the MSP, from exactly that, being a job in an office, to being part of a journey, a story. And the more that you can foster that, and the more you can get your team to believe in that journey, the more important it is for them, and ultimately the better service they can provide for their customers.
Yeah, and that starts on day one. Do you actually, if you think and actually be realistic with yourself, do you spend enough time with your new employees? Do you have a really good, robust onboarding that isn't just technical? You know, we're picking on a technical person. Yes, we want them to be technical. Yes, we want them to know the systems. But do they know the journey? Do they know why you exist? Do they know why you've chose those ways and chose why we do these things this way? And so that's the story. Yeah. You know, people want to know the why. Yeah. Why is it that we sit here and we have a certain structure of a building? Well, it's because of X, Y, Z. And I think if people buy into that why, that is so powerful. Sure. And you see it here. You know, we're in Halo House, and the energy and the passion that comes from here is a mirror image of the owner of the business.
Yeah.
And that's such a, you can't hide from that, but equally when you don't have that, it stands out, and it will stand out to your customers.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that about, the structure and also the building. We were just talking earlier about walls within a business, and that translates to physical walls in the building. And, an important factor around fostering that culture is getting the right people physically next to each other, not just not in an organization perspective, but literally next to each other, open plan. I think that's very important, because that communication is where that culture really comes from. So there's various different ways that you can go about implementing that culture and having that as a priority. And I actually think that the layout of the office is an important factor there.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in a few businesses now where there's, like you say, there's been physical walls. We've had a technical team and we've had a sales team, and there's actually a physical wall in the middle. And we put a lot of effort into removing that physical wall. Those teams working cohesively together ultimately means we look after the customer.
Yeah.
We look after the customer, it's going to look after the business.
Yeah.
You know, if we're having a scramble internal about what we're actually doing and we're pushing things up through leadership, and it takes 6 months for something to return back down again, that's ultimately going to affect a customer at some point in time.
Yeah.
So let's have those those departments where you've got the right people, everyone's behind the culture, and everyone is capable and driven to make those decisions.
Yeah.
You know, it shouldn't be that we're waiting for certain people to make decisions. Everyone should be working together to that ultimate truth of the culture and what we're trying to push forward.
For sure. And I think it also touches on a topic that we've discussed previously about getting out of your own way. If you're too busy stuck into the day-to-day, responding to P1s, being that technical resource while still trying to run the business, you're going to struggle to commit the proper amount of time to building that team. And that ultimately hinders your growth. You're too busy being reactive, addressing the short-term problems, that you haven't invested that time in relaying, communicating that journey, that passion to your tech or to your sales manager. And so they're not really as invested because they don't care, because they haven't had that conversation with you. So it's important to think a little bit more creatively about the solutions that you put in place. And I think getting out of your own way is an important factor there.
I think that's a great one, because you've also got delegation in there. You know, if you're not being an effective delegator and you're not purposely delegating, then you're in that P1 situation. You're in that firefighting situation, which then means you are not spending time with your team. I recently talked about that, spending time with your team. You know, when was the last time you actually went round your team and randomly sat with people and spoke to people or took them out for lunch? And set the frame right. You need to set the frame right of, this is an honest, open conversation. There's no wrong answer. I want you to tell me the truth. What is it like to work in this business? What frustrates you to work in this business? What do you think we don't have clear in this business? You know, what would make you leave this business? But you've got to then actively listen. You've got to be able to have an open, honest, secure conversation that they feel as though there's not going to be hidden agenda here. You know, I'm not going to be sacked tomorrow for telling you what I think. That's actually when you're going to get to know, what does your culture look like? What is driving this business forward or not driving this business forward? But if we're spending all our time firefighting, when do we actually get time to sit with our people? And that's the key. It's, you know, when I see certain businesses, and it does depend on your size of business, but certain businesses that have really nailed that down, and when you ask the owner what consumes their day, it's their people. And they spend time with their people in different scenarios in different ways, whether that be looking at the culture, looking at mentoring, etc. But really, you're trying to make those mirror images of yourselves. You're trying to give them the reasons why there is certain answers to certain things, so they can make their own answers the next time.
For sure. I spoke with an MSP recently who has sort of 5 key tenets of their business about being accountable and honest and proactive, etc. And they look at every decision they make at an organizational level. They bring the team in and they discuss whether the decision they're making is in compliance with those core values. And I think that's a very important factor here. We talk about culture. We talk about what is a good culture. What does that mean? But an important step towards that is defining those points. So you need 5 or 10 key fundamental aspects of what that culture is that you want to drive. You want to communicate that to the team. And I think you want to relay all of those decisions back against the backdrop of, is this in line with the culture? Because that way you're not making decisions in a vacuum. You're making sure that every decision that you're making as a business is staying on that core journey, that core path that you want to follow.
Yeah, and that starts with the owner, because the owner should be using that in their decision-making process, and so should be sharing it. So when an employee is coming to them saying, can you give me an answer to this? If they had, I mean, not always should they give the answer, that's a different topic, but if they do give the answer, they should then be referring to one of those missions or values, so then the individual knows why we made that decision. Because then not only you're giving them the tools to make them answer it themselves the next time, but also you're reaffirming those values within the business. So if you're saying some of your values and some of your cultures multiple times a day, that's going to be so much energy and passion within the business because everybody knows them. You know, how many times do you go into business and the values are written on the wall, but if you stood in front of the words, no one would be able to tell you what they said.
Yeah, exactly. So taking a bit of a sidestep, what do you think about hiring for a senior position versus promoting internally?
Yeah, that's been at my core for years now, and the reason why it's at my core is because we made those decisions and didn't go very well. We hired, one that stands out for me is we hired a very senior person that had all the Microsoft and Cisco qualifications at the time. And literally we put him in front of some Cisco basic switch and he couldn't configure it. So he knew it from a book. He could regurgitate the book, but actually he couldn't fix it. I've done it at leadership level as well. So I'm a big believer of apprenticeship models. And I know some MSPs say it doesn't work, or they are white gloved because they only hire tier 2 and above. And I believe what they're actually saying there is the processes, the structure, the culture, the values, the core building blocks of the business isn't right. And so what they do is they hire those senior people because they will come with certain levels of knowledge and decision making that they can make on their own. But typically they make the wrong decision because it's not aligned to your culture. And I think the biggest reason for that is people don't plan for the future. So people hire somebody when it's already too late and they're maxed out. And so now I need the tier 2 because the apprentice is going to take me a minimum of a year to get them where they're going to add value. And I can't wait a year. So they don't look at their revenue, their profitability, their key numbers that we talked about in another podcast to actually forecast when do we need the next person. They knee-jerk. Or their culture isn't right and they're losing people. We recently did a bit of a calculation and a look around, and the calculation we actually came to was it costed you 200 times that person's salary to actually replace them. Because of the cost, the impact to your customers, the impact to your operations team, the impact to everybody's time to get them to that level. So, there's a lot of value in making sure you bring them in early, you deliver the culture, and they're here for the long term.
It's a proactive versus a reactive mindset, where if you're just hiring to solve a problem, you are always going to be hiring to solve a problem, and you're just hiring to solve the next problem. And when you follow that mentality, you never have real agency over the direction of your business because you're just responding to the current problem at hand, which means you're at whim to whatever that problem is. And you're doing the opposite to what everybody tells you. You read any of the books, it tells you to hire slow and fire fast. If you're in that reactive mode, you're hiring fast, you don't have the structure or the time to actually monitor that individual, and so you fire slow. And so the impact of the business there is dramatic. I know here at Halo, you've got a really big scheme about hiring graduates. Where did that come from? Why are you doing that? So I think the answer to that is there are things that you can teach and there's things that you can't teach. And we are looking for the attributes that you can't teach. We hire for attitude and we hire for aptitude. You can learn Halo, you can learn config, you can learn how an MSP runs, you can learn how to configure a Cisco switch, but you can't learn how to have that motivation and that drive. So pretty much all of the employees at Halo are graduates, and for a lot of the people here, it's their first ever career job. And that, firstly, that has fostered a very strong culture because we're all so similar. We're also like-minded, same age, same demographic. That certainly helps. And then we learn Halo. It takes maybe 6 months to a year to really get up to speed with everything. But now, 6 months, 1 year later, you've got a really strong individual with really strong personal skills that you can't teach, and they know Halo. Versus someone that might come in with, Prince 2 certification and they understand project management, but they're not a right fit for the culture. And they can learn Halo, but it will never be right. And so, what we're looking for is we're looking for aptitude and attitude. And that filters into the interview process as well. So, of course, we look for certain qualifications, certain degrees, A levels, etc. But really, by the time they make it into the office, we're just here to have a chat and just get a feeling of, are we going to get on with this person? Do we think that
will they fit into the culture?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Talking about interview processes, what do you see is most effective from an MSP perspective?
Yeah, I think, definitely, like we say, you've got a plan. And what I see is we're not only reactive, like we've mentioned, but also the amount of times that I see that we don't even have a job description. We are hiring for somebody that we've took them through an interview process, but we don't actually know what that job looks like, or their scorecard, or how effective they're going to be, or what skills they need to come in with, those soft skills that you talked about. Mm-hmm. So actually, I think it starts just slightly before the interview process of what do we need in the business? Mm-hmm. And we're going to be looking at data to address that, mm-hmm. especially if somebody has left it. It's an opportunity to relook at the business. Actually, do we want to replace like for like, or is there a different chess move here that could actually add more value? Mm-hmm. Then we're building the job description. That job description is going to be more what I call a role profile. So a role profile has more than a job description in it. It has what your capabilities are going to be on day one, what we're going to track once you're trained, once you're fully in this job. Here's what good is going to look like for you as an individual. And here's your progression plan over the next 3 years. And here's your onboarding plan. So then in the interview stage, we're presenting all of that and showing them what that's going to look like, because I want this to be a win-win situation. I want you to buy into that's your career for X amount of years.
Yeah.
I don't want people coming in and out every year. Yeah. So we want a really firm structure so they know exactly what are they getting into.
Yeah.
And then we can then have a very good conversation. And we have it as conversations like you do. It's a 30-minute, 1 hour conversation where I'm not really doing the interview questions that you see. It's a conversation because actually I want to know, someone once told me you should always hire if you would go and take that individual for a beer on your own.
Yeah.
Will you take them to the pub and sit there for 2 hours and actually have a conversation with them?
Yeah.
And like you say, I can teach them everything else.
Yeah.
But they need to know what that job's going to look like. I think that's the key, really. And then that forms that interview process.
Yeah.
So many times that people don't know what the job looks like after they've been there a year. And then that also impacts that leaving process. People are leaving because they don't feel like they are successful in the business. They're not bringing the right value when actually they could be. You've just not been very clear about what that is.
Yes, yeah. Defining that roadmap for them, for their career progression, gets them in day one with the right mindset. Otherwise, it kind of goes back to this, why am I doing this? You're making decisions in a vacuum. You're just turning up to the office. You have no idea where you're going to go. You don't, that all ties into that story as well. So I think that's a very important factor.
Yeah, and it's all about being clear, isn't it? Typically as business owners, we feel like we've communicated something, but actually we've gone round in circles, and that individual sat there thinking, I don't know what you just said.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure it's very clear, what is this role? What are you bringing? And what's the pathway? I think it's even more key when we're doing the strategies that me and you are doing, where we're bringing in the apprentices, the graduates, etc. Mm-hmm. This day and age, everybody's very used to something turning up next day. Mm-hmm. And so they order something off Amazon, it comes tomorrow. So they're looking for that in their career path. And so if you're not clear on where the career path's going, you're going to get a white envelope. Yeah. They're going to be coming to you saying, I've just got £1,000 somewhere else. Mm-hmm. When actually, you was going to deliver that to them next month.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, once they've done that, you having that conversation about this is where I was going with you, what they're hearing is you're reacting to what I've just told you, and that was never on the table before.
Yeah.
Because it's too late.
Yeah.
You've already put that bolt in the door.
Yeah.
So we need to be very clear. We have a 3-year pathway. Mm-hmm. There's a 3-year pathway of here's the steps that you need to do, and here's what we will do. And I know you have that pathway of those individuals.
Yeah. How much in accordance with that pathway do you find the team actually follow? Do you find that people are often ahead of that pathway, behind it, or more or less on track?
I think that's a great question. And what jumps into my mind there is the scenario of A players. If you had a four squares inside a bigger square, and you put number one on the top right hand side, and you work your way around, we talk about that number one being A players. Typically in an MSP, we'd love to have everyone as A players. Sure. But actually, in reality, what I see is we want to have a handful of A players, and then we want to have a handful of all the others. Because actually, if we're all A players, we only push this business at a certain pace. And so everybody's going to want that next senior job.
Well, if everyone's an A player, that's not really an A player. That becomes the norm.
The norm as well.
And then you've got to redefine what that A player is, I suppose.
Yeah, but equally, everybody wants too much progression, and you can only create so much progression in the business.
Sure.
I've had many a times running operational teams where I have what I call a black belt tier one. And that tier one's been doing that job for 10 years plus. He's amazing at tier one. He can do it with his eyes shut, but he's still very successful. He's still very energetic. He still loves what he does. He's still very passionate about what he does, but he has no interest in moving on. That's okay. Not all of us are completely career driven, and some people are happy doing that job. So it doesn't concern me that people aren't following the plan, as in, here's a roadmap you could go down. It's more that they know that that's available if they want it.
Yeah. So what does a D tier employee look like?
So a D tier employee would get a lot of my time.
Right.
And so they are very much, in my world, they're toxic.
Right.
And so what I would class as the lower end is that there is something wrong there. So is it that there isn't clarity, or is it that there's not the right culture there? Is it because we're not spending enough time with them? Is it because we've made the wrong hire? But sooner or later, we need to make a decision on, is that person going to carry on? But the way that I was brought up was, we need to make sure we've done everything for the employee to set them up for success before we talk about them not being here. So the way I was brought up, to give an example of that, is if I had a service desk individual that wasn't performing in my mind, and I went to my leader, he would be saying, have you had the one-to-ones? Have you had the performance reviews? Have you done the mentoring? Are the scorecards in place? Have you identified any areas of process improvement? Have we had those frank and open conversations with that individual? If we've done all of that, then I'm happy that we have a conversation about him leaving the business. But typically what you find is some of that isn't there. And actually, that's the reason why you're seeing that behavior. And so that's what needs fixing. Otherwise, you're just going to employ the next person and you'll get the same result.
Yeah. It's not always just necessarily them. It's as the business owner, it's your responsibility, and going back to culture, it's your responsibility to make sure that you're fostering an environment of A players, right? And the more D players that you have, the more you have to ask yourself, is it them or is it you? Who's the common denominator in that situation? And so doing everything in your power to move them through those brackets is very important. And do you find that people often do transfer through those different brackets, or is an A player, a B player, a B player, etc.?
Oh no, people definitely move around those brackets, and sometimes people, I think we talked about it earlier, people move from departments as well. People think that they want to be in operations, but actually they see that there's a skill that they've developed, and actually they now like to try sales. And I think you need to be open to those, and that's sort of where I'm saying, when people leave, there's potentially a different chess play to play. What other things do we want to do here while we've got the opportunity, before we make that chess move and lock ourselves out of the next move? So I think we need to always be open to ideas. And that goes back to being close to your team. Spending time with your team, conversations with your team. It shouldn't then be a surprise to you that that's happened. You know, that should be something you're already thinking about and already trying to mentor to. And also, you know, actually opening up opportunities internally. You know, again, I see so many times where people are saying they want X person to come into the business to fit a role, and they've automatically advertised that external. What does that say to your team? What does that say to where we're going? Why haven't we tried to foster something internally? I would very much definitely have a strategy where if somebody's capable, they want it, they get it, and they've got the capacity, and they're 60% there, I will support them for the other 40% whilst I get them there, rather than hire externally.
Sure. Sure. Bit of a sidestep. What is a bad culture?
Bad culture. I think it's the complete opposite about what we've talked about. It's that sort of, you can see it's fragmented and things are going in different directions. The decisions are being made against different decisions, different directions, different values, and that energy isn't there. Especially in some of the small MSPs we work with, when you see that the owner's the only person that's left at 5 o'clock. The owner's the person that's sleeping on the server room floor because something needs to be done at a customer's.
Yeah.
People should want to be around the business. People should have a good working environment. People should want to be together, because they are like-minded people. They get energy from each other, and so they should want to spend time with each other, even outside of work. Putting on company events, and actually having that fostering of coming together. I think it's the complete opposite that you see. People are coming, they clock in at 9, they go at 5, they don't do anything above and beyond. There's no helping each other. I'm here to do a job and I'm gone.
Yeah. So perhaps a slightly controversial topic. How democratic do you think the business should be? And what I mean by that is, who should be making decisions? At what level do you have someone making those decisions? Do you let your black belt tier 1 make decisions on that service desk process? Or is that something that is only discussed by the leadership team? What do you think about that?
I think it depends on the downgrade, and you'd only know that if you was into martial arts, but that's a bit of a joke. So I think what plays there is a strategy that I learned from a gentleman called Harding Byers. So he talks about judge box. So judge box, if you think about drawing a box on a piece of paper, that is now where they should sit, inside that box. So when they start, that box is very small, and I'm going to help you by delegating to you. So you will watch me do something. And at that point, you are subconsciously unconscious of what I'm doing, because you don't know that's even possible, never mind how to do it. So I'm now going to make you aware of that, and I'm going to teach you how to do it. Then I will watch you, and you will do it, and I will help you and assist you. Then you will do it and I will stand afar, but I'll still be here to assist. And then I will remove myself. So there's 4 steps to that. And when I remove myself, that box goes slightly bigger.
Yeah.
And that thing is now inside that box. But you still know that it's your job to raise your hand if you feel it's stepping outside of what you're comfortable with, because I've explained what it is that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so slowly over time, that box is grown and become bigger. And so what that means is you've not just got your senior leaders that are actually making some decisions. What you've got is also other people that box has grown. They've got the right culture, the right values, the right energy, the right belief, the right things that we're going to do because it's right for the customer.
Yeah.
And they are very much delegated to make that decision. And that's then how we drive that business forward. We don't have it where everything has to go all the way to the top for the top person to answer the question from a muscle and feel and a gut area, and then pass it all back down again. And no one really knows why they made that decision, but we're all going to get on with it.
Yeah, for sure. And from your experience, you mentioned that process there about sort of having them watch you do the decision making, you watch them, you step back, and then you remove yourself. How long do you see that journey taking, roughly? Are we talking weeks, months, years?
I think it really depends on what we're talking about. If it's a basic process type situation, like in your world might be configuring something, it's quite well process documented, but I'm still going to walk you through it. If it's more items around managing and leading people, let's say one of my managers, and I'm working with them on those soft skills, that may take quite a number of time. And so that's where I'm touching base with them a lot. We're having coffees, we're running through scenarios, we're actually looking at certain decisions we've made this week. I might even share with them, this happened this week, are you aware of it? Here's the decision we made, and here's how I got to that. What do you think about that? Was that a decision you would make in the same way? Because potentially there's some learning for me there as well. So I think it all depends on what you're trying to actually push forward there. But I'm also intentional with telling them. So typically what I would do is I would tell them, here's the 4 steps we're going to go through together. And there are times when you will get frustrated with this and you will think, why we're going so slow? And why is it that Darren's still repeating himself and he's not actually let me pick that piece of paper up yet? And actually the reason for that is because I want to make sure I've set you up for success. And I don't want you to be knocked back by that personally if it fails.
Right.
And secondly, unfortunately, certain mistakes will stick forever. And so I don't want that to be my fault for allowing you to make that mistake. I want to make sure you've completely set up for success and you're completely okay with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to let go of the reins. And then it's back to what you said. You need to get out of the way. Stop trying to just, get in there and keep touching it. You need to get out of the way because actually, hopefully, if you've done it correctly and they're the right individual, they'll now take that to the next level because they will be far more dedicated to it. Maybe they're even better at doing that skill than you. And also they've got more time than you. So hopefully they actually take it on and they actually do it better than you.
Yeah.
Which sort of brings me into another scenario where what I see is we try and delegate something and when it doesn't work, we take it back instantly.
Yeah.
And that's because we've done it too fast. Or it's because my expectation is actually higher than the client's expectation. So I might have an expectation of 90%. The client might have an expectation of 70%. So when it goes below 90, I take it back.
Yeah.
Where actually what I should be doing at that point is becoming closer to you, working more with you to make sure it doesn't get to the 70. The client is still happy.
Yeah.
And eventually you will take it further than the 90%.
Yeah, but that's dangerous, I think, because you don't want to, people make mistakes and you want to give people the agency to make those mistakes.
Yes.
And you don't want to take the decision-making power away from them too quickly because it might be that they learn from that mistake and next time they do it better. So that's a tricky one to navigate.
Yeah, but so many times we say, oh yeah, I took that back because only I can do it.
Yeah.
I made the wrong choice and give it to that person, but only I can do this because there's only me that's number one in this business.
Yeah.
That's the completely wrong way of doing it. And what you're going to hit is, what I see, there's a lot of 1.5 million, 2 million, 2.5 million turnover MSPs.
Yeah.
They've hit ceilings.
Yeah.
And some of those MSPs, it's because the business owner only has so many 70 hours in a week.
Yeah.
And so how are you going to push anything else forward?
Yeah.
You've took the business to the maximum you can take it because you can't do any more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had conversations with MSPs in the past who have been 2-3 technicians and asked about, how are you going to grow? And it's all the conversations that we've been having over the last few episodes. And one of them is, a technician might call up and the owner is annoyed that this person doesn't know how to solve something. And it's a matter of, well, did you have the time to actually teach this individual? Do you trust this individual to actually figure it out themselves? Do you get out of your own way? If you don't have that trust in your team and you don't have that desire to actually get out of the way and you constantly have your hands on too much of the business, I think that's when you have problems. I know that a friend of ours, Mit Patel, talks about working on your business, not in your business. And I think that's definitely resonated with me for sure.
Yeah, and I think you've got to have a really strong think about why is it like that. It's either because, in my opinion, it's either because you've got the wrong team, or it's because you've got the wrong culture, or it's because you're not growing as an individual. So you've got to look at what are those things that's making me not trust these individuals, or that's making me do those P1s. What is that? And then we've got to have an intentional strategic plan to change that. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just going to continuously go round in circles like Groundhog Day. Yeah. And when I speak to that individual in a year's time, nothing will have changed. We're still trying to muscle and feel everything through because we haven't got time to do anything else. So we've got to be really intentional of, unfortunately, typically, all these things in the business that we've talked about is down to the owner. Yeah. The buck stops with the owner, and so the owner has to either up their skills or be intentional to change something.
Totally agree.
So I think in conclusion then, Morgan, I think what we're actually coming down to here is that you've got to be intentional with culture. And for me, it's all about, if you look after your people, the people will look after the customers, and the customers will look after the profitability of the business. If we're intentional about doing this, we've got to put the time into it.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of Scale Up, don't forget to like and subscribe. If there are any topics that you would like to see on a future episode of Scale Up, please leave a comment below.